Hello.
Hey Mika, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. It's been a good start so far.
That's good.
Um,
That's important.
what is this? Art of clean dissected art? Oh, oh, sorry. Ugh, and the cat's already grabbing me. Gosh, how are you doing?
I had a pretty slow morning, so that was kind of nice, but I wish I was a little bit more productive than I was.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
This is kind of how I feel about my Saturday yesterday. Uh,
Yeah.
But that was okay. I had a nice, relaxing, fun Saturday. I didn't get anything done, and that's fine.
And that's
I'm,
okay.
I tend to be one of those people who is overly productive, and so it was good to just have a day off. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling.
Uh, well, I do not have a ton prepared today.
Okay.
So what I thought we would do today then is we'll do a full 2 hours. Unlikely I'll have enough content. But I've been working on most strongly supported questions, inference type questions in LR.
Yeah.
And I figured what we could do is a little bit of well, we'll create some curriculum together.
Okay.
And sort of just spend it'll just basically be a class focused entirely on, I don't know, discussing and laying out what's happening with most strongly supported.
Okay. Sounds
Okay,
like a plan.
let's dive in then. And then I thought a couple of my students said they were coming, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to show up on Sundays. I get it. I get it.
I was also expecting some people from Law Society because we've been having regular events these last couple of weeks,
Oh,
and
okay.
some people they walked out of the room saying, "Oh, I'll see you on Sunday."
As always. As
Yeah.
always. That's okay. That's okay. I mean, like, they'll watch the videos, they'll learn from those. It'll be guys.
Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. So, most strongly supported questions. I don't think, you and I have talked about these when we've met before,
Hmm.
but they're a very common question type. I think, let's see, one, two, three, four, fifth most common question type on the exam. They're also a bit weird, right? In the sense that a most strongly supported prompt isn't an argument, right? Everything in our assumption and objection family here, we get an argument and we interact with it in some way, right? We look at the
Yeah.
match family and we're describing existing arguments, complete arguments. So there's really like three question types that don't involve existing arguments. Most strongly supported, must be true, and paradox. Most strongly supported and must be true are basically the same question type, except one is purely conditional or mathematical logic. That's must be true. And most strongly supported is all organic logic, inferential logic. So it has sort of a twin, but its twin is very different from it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have paradox. And in paradox, we get a set of information and we provide an explanation for how it could have happened, right? We provide causation. Most strongly supported is the opposite. We look at a set of information and we ask, what can we infer as a result of this? We draw a conclusion from it. So, this is the only question type where we have no argument. That puts it in a group of three. And out of that group of three, it's the only one where we're drawing a conclusion that isn't conditional. So, most strongly supporteds are weird, just by default. One of the reasons that they're weird is because it is so difficult to predict what direction a most strongly supported might go in. So let's just look at this standard. This is a, difficulty one, pretty easy one. We can see that we're getting a series of information that is related to each statement is somewhat related to one of the others. So in our first statement, I see that house painting, acrylic paints are an excellent choice. They, acrylic paints, provide everything a good paint should provide. And they give me a little list. Even acrylics, however, cannot correct such surface defects as badly cracked paint. Such conditions, those surface defects, indicate some underlying problem, such as water damage, that needs repair. So, a series of statements that are all tied in with each other, right? The problem for us as a test taker is they don't have to use all of this information. And in fact, sometimes the correct answer and most strongly supported is just re-summarizing one statement. It's not even interactive in the sense that you're tying multiple things together. So unlike a strengthen or a weaken where we have an anticipation, right? We have a direction that we can kind of see or hopefully find an anticipation before answering. Most strongly supporteds rarely allow for easy anticipation. And so that's, I think, its distinguishing feature as a question. This is the LR question type that is least conducive to making anticipations. So instead, a big part of our goal is to think about how to eliminate what is within scope, what is too definitive. So for example, badly cracked paint is not a result of harsh weather conditions. How would I know that? Well, if I look over here, some people might go, okay, they mentioned badly cracked paint here, and then they said that's water damage. But they said this indicates some underlying problem, such as water damage. They never said that water damage is the only thing that can cause surface defects. So I have no idea whether harsh weather conditions can cause surface defects, such as badly cracked paint. So A is out because I lack the information to make that call. B, acrylics are the only paints that provide everything that most homeowners need from a paint. That immediately brings up the only word. Only is one of the most intense logical concepts that exists, right? Exclusivity and necessity, right? Acrylics are the only paints? I mean, they told me a lot about acrylics, but they told me nothing about other paints. So B is out. I don't know if acrylics are the only good paints for a homeowner. I just know that they are a good paint for a homeowner. Acrylics should not be used to paint over other types of house paint. They mentioned badly cracked paint. They never mentioned just painting over other regular types of paint. So C is out. I lack information. Now D works. It is not a requirement of house paints that they correct surface defects. They told me acrylics are excellent and they do everything a good paint should do for house painting purposes. So clearly, for house painting purposes, it is not a requirement that you be able to correct surface defects. And we also feel how much softer it is to say that something is not a requirement versus that only word where we're basically saying it is. Much more supportable to say something is not required. And then E, totally out of scope, as wide a range of colors. Colors was never mentioned once, just totally down the road. So that's the most strongly supported. That's just a level 1. What you saw up here is what you should also be thinking about. I should have said that. So there's 2 key ideas to think about as you improve at most strongly supported. So number 1 is identifying key logical features that lend themselves to tying information together, right? And so you saw as I read this one, I noticed that acrylics was kind of the central motif of this entire prompt. You notice that I called out the qualitative words. Acrylics are excellent. They provide everything a good paint should provide. They cannot correct surface defects, right? So I'm capturing little features that I know could be used. So things like quality statements, can slash cannot, require slash do not require, right? Anytime I see a little feature like this, I just want to take note of it because that helps me figure out which of these answers properly corresponds to the logical features. Hey, kitty. Sorry, I got a cat right here. Okay. So we're going to go to a much harder one, a level 4 here. But what I really like doing these two in sequence because what you'll see is they're really kind of the same argument when you look at it. So here we've got any good garden post may be appropriately used for soil drainage and fertility. The best compost is 40 to 60% organic and is dark brown in color, so a little bit of a joint requirement idea. However, reversal word, compost that emits a strong ammonia smell should not be used for drainage and fertility, for that smell means the organic matter has not sufficiently decomposed. Right? So again, qualitative words, requirement words, reversal words, and recommendation words. So now that I've got these, I'm going to go over, I'm just going to think to myself, okay, there's a lot of potential combinations, but clearly compost is the central motif here. So I look at A and I say compost that is 80% organic matter has probably not decomposed sufficiently. I don't know what that means. I see that the best compost is 40 to 60% organic matter, right? I don't know what sufficiently means. I just know that if it smells like ammonia, then that means it has not sufficiently decomposed. So A is trying to tempt me into like taking this partial piece of information and jam it into this one, but I don't have a direct connection between them. Um, so A is out, right? The ammonia spell might only kick in at 85% or 90% for all I know. Yeah. If the compost is less than 40% organic matter, okay, that takes it outside of best and is not dark brown in color, then it will make nope. This tells me what the best is. This is saying, effectively, B is saying if it isn't the best, then it will actively make things worse. I don't have anything in here that says using anything other than the best compost is actively bad. So B is out, right? That consequence is not supported. If the compost is 50% organic matter, okay, that puts it in the best area. And it has been decomposed, then it is good. But oh, C again is trying to ask me to jam a bunch of sentences together that aren't necessarily tied to each other. I know that the best compost is 40 to 60%, but it's also dark brown in color. And this doesn't mention the color at all. Instead, it just mentions sufficiently decomposed. But I don't know how sufficiently decomposed relates to being good. I do know if it did smell like ammonia, that would not be good garden compost. So C is just trying to mishmash a bunch of things together without rhyme or reason. D in the best garden compost, I don't know. I don't know what completely decomposed means. I really don't know what that means. And also they said the best compost is 40 to 60%. Is that completely decomposed? I don't know what decomposed means in this context, honestly. But E, now E doesn't have to play with a mishmash of rules. It plays with a very clear rule. If it's ammonia, it shouldn't be used for drainage and fertility. Any good garden compost can be used for drainage and fertility. So anything that smells like ammonia is by definition not a good garden compost. And so you can see one of the tricks here, and they love to do this, is that they took the first sentence and the last sentence and used them with each other, right? They create physical distance and ignore this best compost idea in the middle completely. Except not even, because they actually grab the idea of dark brown. But this is a joint requirement, and this is a clear single requirement. Simonia, not used to drain fertility. Garden compost may be appropriately used. So E follows directly. All right. So let's go see something, I don't know, tough that I've never done before. All right. We got a few. So now we'll see me do one that I have literally never done. So this should be a little bit more interesting since it's completely organic. Give me one sec. Yeah, I see you. All right. If the statements above are true, which of the following can be most reasonably inferred from them? So one of the great difficulties in establishing animal rights based merely on the fact that animals are living things concerns scope. If one construes the term living things broadly, one is bound to bestow rights on organisms that are not animals. But if the term is construed narrowly, one is apt to refuse rights to organisms that, at least biologically, are considered members of the animal kingdom. So this is interesting, right? This would not be a difficulty if the author believed that we should give plants rights. So clearly the author thinks that there is at least some like okayness with plants not having rights. Otherwise, this wouldn't be a difficulty. So it must be that the author thinks that the correct definition is somewhere in between these two definitions. I'm not sure if I can construe anything else. Definitely not A. The author seems to think that it would be, I don't know, seems to imply that we should be able to do that, but there's no should. I'll keep going. One cannot bestow, the author didn't say it was impossible to do, just that we have to construe the term the right way. Every attempt. Do you see that intensity of language there? The problem of delineating the boundary interferes with every attempt. I'm not sure I understand every attempt. So I'll hold C, but I think that that's probably beyond the scope. Successful attempts to establish rights for all animals are likely to either establish rights for some plants or not to depend are likely or not to depend solely on the observation. Successful attempts would not depend solely on the observation that animals are living things. These older test questions are phrased so oddly here. Successful attempts to establish rights for all animals are likely to establish rights for some plants or not to depend solely. Not to depend solely on. That's the sort of language we like and are most strongly supported, right? It's very soft. I think we saw like saying something is not a requirement is a very good soft way to do something. And this just also cabins it as likely as well, as opposed to must. So I dig that. I think I'm going to go ahead and get rid of C now. I don't think the every attempt is justifiable. And E is definitely out of scope. So I think I would choose D out of like just rules of thumb and some like it's a soft idea. Everything else feels way more intense. Not all animals should be given rights. One cannot, every attempt, And this one's just like kind of ignoring the argument entirely. In a situation that avoids C, we either have to do B or to have to avoid doing A. Whew. So this is a really good example of I solved by approximation to some degree, right? D is the weakest and softest language out of all four answer choices by far. Just by having a probability modifier likely and a non-requirement statement, D became way more attractive. I would have to say that I didn't fully understand what D is, how it logically connects, but I could also tell it was definitely the right answer regardless. And I think that that feeling is most common on the test and most strongly supported. Hey, see another one. Unless Mega, do you want to take the lead on this one?
You go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Okay. All right, so let's see. Which of the following inferences is most supported? Vitamin XYZ has long been a favorite among health food enthusiasts. In a recent large study, those who took large amounts of vitamin XYZ daily for 2 years showed on average a 40% lower risk of heart disease than did members of a control group. Okay, researchers corrected for differences in relevant health habits such as diet. That include exercise? Doesn't matter. Okay. Presuming that this study has been correctly run, it seems to indicate that vitamin XYZ is helpful for lowering heart disease. Not sure what else to take away from this. I'm interested to see what makes this a 4 star. Because it has to be the answers. There's not a lot of info here, and there's not a lot of like to take away other than that. All right. No. So A, too broad. We're talking about one vitamin. This says vitamins, right? This sort of scope shift is easy to accidentally fall for, but we are very specifically talking about one vitamin. What? Those who take large doses of vitamin XYZ daily for the next 2 years will exhibit, on average, an increase in the likelihood of avoiding heart disease. I mean, that's drawing a very causative idea, but yeah. Liv, who has taken large amounts of XYZ for the past 2 years, has a 40% lower risk of heart disease than she did 2 years ago. No, this is 40% compared to the control group, not compared to your personal starting point. C is the wrong sort of measurement. It's a tempting one, right? But it's not a comparison against herself, it's a comparison against the control. Um, See, now D is one of those ones that feels really tempting, but number one, we never had a should up here. And I feel weird about shoulds. This is factual statements, not recommendation statements. And also, I don't know if this vitamin has other health issues that would be like, that could be bad for most adults, right? Like maybe this is good for some subset of adults, but would cause issues for other adults. Or maybe you don't want to take them your whole adult life. Yeah, yeah. E is just out of scope, right? Large, again, we're getting vitamins, multiple vitamins, but this is XYZ. I think B is the most supported. At the end of the day, this appears to be a well-run study I mean, now granted, it seems to have been a self-selection study where the groups aren't being randomly assigned, and that's usually very, very bad for the validity of a study. But they did correct for all of the relevant differences. So I think this study is intended to prove causation, and this is the sort of causation it's intending to improve. And it just says will exhibit on average. Doesn't say every single person of them will actually be improved, just there will be an average increase in the likelihood of avoiding heart disease. Yeah, I see you. I see you. All right. That was an interesting one. It's rare to see one like this where it's just a straight up saying, hey, this was a good experiment. The correct answer is the causative one. Yeah. Hmm. All right. All right. I'll take one more and then pause and do like a little work back and survey of what we've been doing so far. I'm not gonna play with you right now. I'm working. Just looking at me begging. All right. The US ranks behind Sweden and Canada when it comes to workplace safety. In all three countries, joint labor management committees that oversee workplace safety conditions have been successful. In the US, such committees are found only in the few companies that have voluntarily established them. However, in Sweden and several Canadian provinces, joint safety committees are required by law and exist in all medium-sized and large workplaces. All right. So it sounds to me like the voluntariness of this is why it is, the US ranks far behind, or at least a partial reason why it ranks far behind. Um, Honestly, A feels like pretty well supported just by default, right? They point out that these two countries are doing better. They point out that, like in Sweden as a whole, this is required by law, and in several Canadian provinces. Um, I don't think we could say that the voluntary one is less effective. It just seems that there's fewer of them in the US. No, this is making a really crazy jump inference-wise. Again, I don't know, like, why would we know this? Like, we don't know how this all started. We just know where it is now. So telling me about how they were established makes no sense. And surpass doesn't make sense. So A seems pretty clear. Is this a hard difficulty one? Huh. So this is a common feeling I think you'll run into with most strongly supported sometimes, right? Sometimes you'll just be like, well, that was easy. And everybody else is like, no, that was hard. And then sometimes you'll be like, well, that was hard. And everybody else like, no, that was easy. Um, this one seemed pretty straightforward to me, right? They told us about a comparison. They differentiated the three things being compared in some specific ways. And it feels like the causation was clearly meant to be implied by those differentiations, right? The reason Sweden and Canada are ahead of the US is because these are required in many, many more companies than in the US. All right. Let's see. What was the most chosen wrong answer? B. Wow, a lot of people fell for the idea that the voluntariness has made it worse. But they specifically pointed out that these committees are rarer in the US. So it was just immediately to me, I said, well, if they're rarer, how could I blame the voluntariness for the reduced effectiveness? That doesn't make any sense. Hmm. So this is a good question for just for that idea of paying attention to details. B is very clearly written out over here, right? And in fact, the second sentence, as Patrick points out, says that in all of these countries, the committees have been very successful. And then they point out that the US has fewer committees. That's just paying attention to detail. All right. So that one is a good, that one's a good example, just more broadly of the idea of comparing both the outcome and the inputs that created the outcome, right? Everything about that last question was, I can see the outcome clearly here, and they're giving me distinguishments between the various things being compared, and that allows me to make a conclusion about how those things affect outcomes. That was probably one of the reasons why it popped to me so easily, is because I know this sort of setup really, really well, right? I can recognize this setup and strengthen, weaken, most strongly support it. So let's see, quality statements, can slash cannot, require slash do not require, comparison of outcomes, and comparison of inputs. Uh, Universalizing is one of the, definitely one of the ones we've seen so far. If the prompt is a specific example, make certain that the answer reflects that. So I'll give the example of, if we're talking specifically about salmon, the correct answer is not going to talk about fish in general, right? We've definitely seen a few wrong ones that way. Um, I, I don't know what you want. What? Okay, let me see. What was I saying? Sorry, I got thrown off by the cat attacking again. Ba, 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 ba. Time framing. Um, Unless we have information about the past, don't ever choose an answer that speculates on what happened in the past. Dun, dun, dun. Same for the future. Would surpass if all we have is information about the present, then don't speculate on how things could change if. Mhm. Let's bump out of there and let's take a look at some, let's probably got a couple of 5 stars I've never done. Oh yeah, I've got a few left. All right, let's use 2 of them today. All right, so the statements above, if true, give the most support to which one of the following? Comets do not give off their own light, but reflect light from other sources, such as the sun. Okay. Scientists estimate the mass of comets by their brightness. The greater the comet's mass, the more light they will reflect. Estimate, and this is a scaling relationship, right? A volume dial. A satellite probe, however, has revealed that the material of which Halley's Comet is composed reflects 60 times less light per unit of mass than previously thought. I mean, come on. Come on. So clearly that what this is saying is that Halley's Comet is much more massive than we previously thought, because we were judging based on the light, and our judgment was 60 times less than it actually is, or 60 times more than it actually is. Okay, so I'm definitely just looking for, yeah, B. Nope, they were aware of the amount of light. They were wrong about how to interpret it. Spectral properties of materials are supposed very. I have no idea. Woo. Well, hold on to that for a half second. I don't know if they need more information. They might have all of it now. Yeah, it has to be B, right? Like that's clearly the implication here. Their measurement system was off by multiple, like by six. Yeah. All right. I'm overthinking this. Yeah. So a good example of one that just instantly clicked for me that doesn't necessarily instantly click for other people. I wonder, wow, it wasn't even D that people chose. It had to be E. What are people choosing? Oh my God, reading comprehension, people. Sorry. I'm just like I can't believe this many people chose C, right? They literally said that there's 60 times less light per unit of mass than previously thought. They were measuring the light directly already, right? It's the relationship between light and mass that has changed. Oh God, that's a bad honk right there. Gosh. Okay. Okay. You all see my frustration here with all of these students that chose C, right? Like it's literally the opposite of what they're saying. Um, so I guess if you read this one correctly, B pops pretty hard, and if you read it incorrectly, then you're almost instantly choosing C. Yeah. Everything else was like less than 10%. See, I thought D was the only other tempting one, but that it was like considerably. But they also only told me about Halley's Comet. It could be that this is true for all comets. I'm not sure. And that's why I ended up not choosing D. Yeah. All right. Which of the following is most strongly supported? Okay. Zebra mussels, a nuisance when they clog the intake pipes of nuclear power plants and water plants around the Great Lakes, have some redeeming qualities. Since the mussels voraciously feed on algae that filter from the water that passes by, bags of zebra mussels can significantly improve water quality, even removing some hazardous wastes. Okay, maybe something like sometimes a nuisance can also have value. Um, Clog the intake pipe, suspended in the discharge streams. So clearly, it's like if you do this the right way, it can be helpful, but it can also happen organically and be really annoying. All right. All right. So let's see. Steer muscles. No. What? Displacing native clams? That's just begging for people to bring in outside knowledge. And the muscles spread to the. I don't. I. I don't know. This one also feels wild. Like, I don't know, maybe there's an easy way to control zebra mussels, for all I know. Um, I have no idea. It just says they're a nuisance when they clog the pipes. I don't know if there's no mechanical means. They may have a mechanical means. It's just annoying as hell. Um, the algae on which the mussels feed would, if not, no, I don't know if the algae would clog anything. What? I don't, none of these, all of these answers seem nuts to me. Um, I have no reason to think it's C or D, C or D. This just feels like it's not even the prompt, right? Like, what in the prompt has anything to do with B? Nothing. That can't be the answer. It literally has nothing to do with the information given. It's just like a self-contained answer almost. Of course, this is from the test that got withdrawn from scoring, so. And it can't be A. That just makes no sense. I guess E. E at least like mentions something that was in the original. Okay. What? Okay, so this one is just like a massive stretch where every other answer is bad, even worse. That is so goofy. I also don't know why Patrick wrote 3 paragraphs here instead of just saying it's the best answer available. Or it has some relationship to what we were already told and none of the other answers do. Uh, yeah, this is out of scope. This is out of scope. This is like no and mechanical. We just said it's a nuisance. And again, this is like very speculative. So D is the other one people chose. I, yeah, that is such a stretch. All right. So this is definitely a good example of one of those 5 stars that just kind of makes very little sense, and that's why it's a 5 star. But you saw how I ultimately approximated it. E very much ties in with something we talked about, and it does have at least like the veneer of reasonableness, right? If zebra mussels eating a whole bunch of chemical crap in the algae and it doesn't discharge it, yeah, we probably don't want to eat that mussel, right? Just like, we worry about mercury in fish and everything. Yeah. D, as Patrick points it out, is posing a counterfactual. What would happen if the facts given to us were not true? That's almost never a valid way to answer probably almost any type of question, but definitely not a most strongly supported, right? Counterfactuals are almost intensely off limits unless the prompt itself gives us an indication of how that counterfactual would play out. All right, cool, 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 cool. Some goofy old ones. That's what I'm noticing. These older tests do some weird stuff. All right, any questions, comments so far?
I think I have one question for this one.
Yeah.
I guess around the idea of like of overlapping language and
Hmm.
why do you think so many students fell for answer choice D?
It's the idea that if these are creating a problem by solving a problem, the absence of this solution would allow would cause both problems to continue. So I think it's just yeah, let me put that in better words. The setup here is that these things are a problem that they clog the pipes, but they also eat algae. And I guess people automatically assume that, like, well, they're eating the algae because the algae is on the pipes, right? And therefore, if they weren't eating the algae would get in the way. But of course, like, if you pause for half a second and think about what algae is, that makes no sense. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't have a very clear conception of what algae is. So I guess I can see the thought process here, right? If they stop eating the things that are on the pipes, won't those things clog the pipes? The problem is, like, there's nothing in the prompt that indicated that would be the case, right? It also didn't say, like, the algae can grow up to X volume on the edge of pipes or something. There's no indication that the algae itself will clog intake pipes. And so while it is like potentially like reasonable to draw this inference, there's really nothing to support it within the passage itself. That's the way I would put it. E has much more support within the passage, right? With the idea that, yeah, something that is removing hazardous waste, if they do not transform it, should probably also be viewed as hazardous waste. Right? I think that's a relatively reasonable inference. And I think this clause in E is the most important clause. It basically points out if there's no way for them to get rid of the toxic crap they eat, then yeah, we probably shouldn't eat them or use them for anything. We should regard them as hazardous waste as well. Yeah. Does that explain it, Branson? Or
Yeah, no, this
helpful?
makes sense. Yeah, I think when we're doing most supported, we're obviously looking for what's reasonably inferred and looking for soft language. And I think like if they do not, like the highlighted part is very soft language, which makes E attractive. So I'm just trying to see how I guess I'm trying to compare D and E, but I guess I see how E actually works.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think E works because it because of that clause. It really like emphasizes, yeah, if they're just eating waste and they never get rid of it, then we should probably think of them as waste. Yeah, pretty logical. Um, I would just say like there's no indication from the prompt that D would actually happen, and therefore it's much more of a stretch. I agree that like this is one of those ones where strength of language is not helpful, right? Like this any and they must, right? There's some very strong language in E. So this is a bit of like it defies expectations to some degree. Let's see. Let me jump to this one. Okay. So psychologists have found that implementation of schedules tailored to individual needs does not typically increase manager satisfaction or their efficiency, although this may be because most managers already have the autonomy to adjust their own schedules. But these flexible schedule policies do increase job satisfaction, productivity, and attendance among non-managerial employees. These benefits dissipate somewhat over time, however. Okay. And they are reduced even further if schedules are too elastic. Okay, so I'm getting a causation set up with this differentiation between managers and non-managers. I'm betting the correct answer will play off of that. Let's go see. Implementing flexible schedules. This is a little speculative, right? Who do not already have scheduling autonomy. They said this may be because most managers already have autonomy. They didn't say it is because. And A is treating that as though it were definitive rather than them positing an idea. So I think A is out. Not the overall morale. I don't think I could say that here. They said that these increased satisfaction among non-managerial employees, which is most of a company's workforce. So I don't know why this would say just some, but not the overall. Seems like this works for basically everyone that isn't a manager. Ooh, okay. This is a good pause moment. Words like substantially, significant, much, any sort of flavoring intensity word is really important on this exam. So this definitely says that there should be an increase. but it also says these benefits dissipate somewhat over time. I don't know if this would substantially improve a company's productivity and satisfaction in the long run. If this didn't have the word substantially, C would be the absolute correct answer. Flexible schedules should be expected to improve a company's productivity. That's what they told us, right? This works for all non-managerial employees. But substantially makes C unjustifiable. I don't know the magnitude of the increase, and therefore I can't choose C. There's little correlation between managers' job satisfaction and their abilities. Nope, again, that was speculative, and they thought that there would be, actually. So D seems both the opposite of true and based on speculation. Ah, the typical benefits of flexible schedule policies cannot be reliably inferred just by looking at managers. Boom. That played off of that distinction between manager and non-manager that I spotted earlier, and that answer does exactly what I expected it to. All right. So this fits into a class. I was actually writing about this earlier. Where was it? In tab 6. There, I'm gonna actually add that question here. 142.18. So if you ever see a most strongly supported that involves some sort of framing of if X, then ABC, if not X, then FGH, right? This duality setup that they did here, you should always expect the correct answer to summarize the two choices or identify a joint requirement between them. So here we had a if manager, not major impact. If non-manager, then does increase all of these things, and E summarized that distinction to some degree. So this is definitely a sort of setup that they use a lot in 4 and 5-star most strongly supported and must be trues. All right. Computer proofs. Haven't I done this one a whole bunch? I thought I was choosing ones that I haven't done very often. Yeah, how did I end up doing those ones in the 130s? All right. Flower, I need you to just go somewhere else, please. Okay. So I actually used to teach this one a whole lot. Uh, back before I went. Oh, what's up, Branson?
The question stem here are we're still doing most strongly supported, correct? Or is this a strengthened question?
Most strongly supported. Yeah. So we're basically saying if we accept the art critic's response as true, which of the following conclusions is there the strongest support for already?
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think the I know within, correct me if I'm wrong, but in most supported questions, we are reading statements, not arguments, correct?
Correct. This is
But
definitely a little bit different.
yeah, so I guess I'm thrown off here because it literally says conclusion in the question stem. So yeah, I think that's where I guess I'm a bit confused because
Well,
I would think like, oh, this is a strengthened question given most strongly supported is the stimuli are statements, not actual arguments.
that's perfectly fair, but we also get unique question stems sometimes. And this is an older test, 106. They were still doing some weirder stuff back then. They had a lot more two-speaker setups in the early exams.
Mhm.
Um, but if we read the language, it's the art critic's response would provide the strongest support for which one of the following conclusions. So we're basically just drawing a conclusion based on the art critic's objection. So I would say we're still doing what a most strongly supported asks us to do, which is to sort of draw a conclusion from the information presented to us. Yeah. But it does point out the importance of closely reading every question stem, because this is definitely something they use a lot, right? Because strongest support is a phrasing that can be used in both strengthens and in most strongly supported, but obviously we're doing very different things in those two. So mistaking the question stems is a very important one to avoid. Yeah. So good question. Really good question. And definitely like a trap feature of the test to some degree. Yeah. All right. So let's see. Decision to restore the cloak from its present red to the green found underneath is fully justified. X-ray and chemical tests showed that the red pigment was applied after the painting had been completed and that the red paint was not mixed in Veronese's workshop. Hence, it appears likely that an artist other than Veronese tampered with Veronese's painting. The art critic responds, but in a copy of Veronese's painting made shortly after Veronese died, the cloak is red. It is highly unlikely that a copyist would have made such a major change so soon after Veronese's death. So I guess the implication is that regardless of whether Veronese intended it to be red or green when he initially painted it, what is the God? The implication is that at the time of Veronese's death, he had potentially himself painted over the cloak and made it red. Um, so that's what the art critic seems to be driving towards, that even though the original was not green, it was red when Veronese died, and Veronese must have wanted it that way. Go ahead.
Okay, this is a really interesting one. And I'm curious if it's possible that I or Mega, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, can walk you through like these answer choices and like help us explain, like help us
Go for
rationalize
it.
our logic here.
Yeah, go for it, Branson.
Okay. I typically like to start from bottom up, just
Okay.
like as a practice of mine. So I typically do E to A. So looking at E, Berenice did not originally intend the central figure's cloak to be green. And reading that, I would eliminate it because the idea of intent, or original intent is kind of out of scope. We don't see anything about like what Berenice intended to do.
Agreed.
So I would
Agreed. We
eliminate
just
E.
know what it was at the time. Very good point.
The value of an artist's work is not necessarily compromised when that work is tampered with by later artists. Um, I would also eliminate D because the value is not something that we're focused on in the art critic's response. He's saying that it's just highly unlikely that someone who would copy it would make a major change. So I would
Hmm.
feel like D is also out of scope, but it has that kind of almost trappy, like not necessarily, which is weak language, which are things we look for in most strongly supported questions. But I would still eliminate D.
Okay.
Um, the proposed restoration will fail to restore. I think that is completely out of scope and far too strong. Like will fail is like too certain of itself. And that's not what we're trying to prove within the art critics response. So I would also eliminate C.
Okay.
Um, God, I hope I'm doing this correctly. No painting should be restored before the painting is tested with. I would eliminate B because that's also very strong. The like absolute language of not a single painting should be stored is restored is very strong. Um,
I agree.
painting,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would eliminate B, and then the copy of Veronese's painting that was made soon after the painter's death is indistinguishable from the original. Is not able to be too much from the original. I'm just hiding my red copies without the major change. Yeah, oh God, I think I would choose A on this one.
Are you choosing A because you feel good about it or because it's the last answer you approached?
I would honestly because of process of elimination, but I think like the very last claim that the art critic makes, like it is highly unlikely that a copyist, so someone who would have made a change. So yeah, so yeah, I think that very last claim allows me to choose A, but but let me know if my logic or my train of thought is incorrect or could be, reworked.
So, I think part of the timeline we might have here is Veronese makes original painting with green cloak. Veronese himself paints over the cloak and makes it red, then dies. So, A, I would ask, is the original the green cloak? Because it is the green is the original. It's clear that the green was the original color. The question more is, did Veronese want it to be red ultimately? So I think I'll click this and it'll say indistinguishable. I
Hmm.
would just say I think the original painting was green, right? That's what the X-ray tests show. So it's
Hmm.
just more about what happened before Veronese died. It's common for painters to, finish a painting and then make edits and changes to it. So I do think you're right to focus on the back end here about so soon after Veronese's death. Is there another answer that really hits this idea about what it was like when Veronese died?
Oh, sorry, I don't know. I think I think I was muted. I think I would say C.
Yeah, I think C is the better of these two answers. I think the indistinguishable here is definitely too strong. That's one of those like equals type words. But this hits the idea of we don't have to think about where it was originally, just what it was like when Veronese died. Yeah.
Get hot at the end.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, wow. I absolutely see how this is the correct answer. I think I was absolutely deterred by the idea of like will fail
Mm.
to restore the paintings. Yeah, how did that end up?
But here it's the idea that we're treating the art critic's response as being true. And so if the art critic's response is true, this feels like this. I agree, it'd be a lot more comfortable if it said will likely fail.
Yeah,
And I bet this wouldn't be a 5 star if it said will likely fail. Yeah. You're right, honestly. This is too strong. We don't know this for certain. Even the art critics said highly unlikely. So C seems to overrun what the critics said, but it's the best answer available. Yeah. And that's part of the annoyance on these 5 stars sometimes, right? They like break the rules that LSAC has been teaching us, you know. But it's like I said, you have a good eye for the detail, Branson. This would be a much better answer if it had some sort of hedging, because that would actually match the art critic. But the
yeah,
slight intensification of strength is okay because it's still better than everything else. Yeah.
totally. Okay, that it actually makes sense, and I see where I was going, and I think I almost chose A out of uh process of elimination, and I wasn't really able to support it, but I yeah, I think I'll have to personally um get into the habit of like understanding that just because I've eliminated others doesn't mean I should automatically choose something if I can't directly support it from the stimulus.
I would always just say that process of elimination doesn't stop after your first pass, or
Okay.
doesn't stop at your first pass. Like, our brains tend to understand these questions more as we go through each answer, right? Because we recheck different features, we examine the language of each answer, we knock it out for being out of scope, we check back on why. And so what ends up happening is that you might go from E to A, and then the answer was E. But you didn't see it at the time because you didn't understand the question well enough. But if you take a second full look at E, it'll pop. So I just call it a recovery tactic, right? What do I do when I don't like any of the answers? Is something we should have an active strategy for. It was easier back when the test was on paper because I would just literally physically mark how good I thought each answer was. It wasn't just an open or close, right? I could go, hey, I like this answer, but I'm not sure. And then I go, yeah, I also like this one. And then I would go, no to this, no to this. Okay, maybe barely it's in contention. And so I would have like these little markings to indicate how likely I thought each answer was to be correct. And therefore, if I got through all five and didn't feel good, I could go back and look at the ones that I thought were the best available. So I wish y'all had something like that other than just the X, right? Because I don't think the X really helps in terms of that recovery strategy. Yeah. Um, but it is important to have one. So these days, I usually just try to tag in my head like which ones, things that are out of scope are rarely worth revisiting. Things that you eliminate based on their wording are often worth revisiting. That's like a good rule of thumb when you're like in recovery and trying to go back through the five again. Things that are out of scope tend to just be out of scope. But sometimes we make reading mistakes or we don't appreciate the full import of every single word. And so I tend to return to the ones I eliminated based on wording first. Or just like happened to you here, you correctly diagnosed that C was too strong. But once you got to A, you sort of settled for an even more too strong answer. But I bet if you had just looked at A and C at exactly the same time and compared them directly with each other, you would have been like, oh, the overstrong in C is not as big of a problem as the overstrong in A. So just getting ourselves to make that second look is critical to like pushing into the 170s, right? There will always be instances where you go through five. You saw me a couple times today where I went through five answers and I hated all of them. And so I just like kind of approximated which ones were most wrong. And what was that one earlier? It's not, we don't have it teed up anymore. But sometimes that's the way it is, and we just have to be able to handle it when it happens. So think about if you notice, I would just say as you keep practicing, right? Every time you miss like this, where you really sort of ended up choosing the last answer available, think about how did you feel at the time and remember that. Remember that that feeling means that you're about to make a mistake, right? And that you need to slow down and rethink the answers again, right? Um, it's like about building internal cues to some degree. Yeah. All right. So I think we're just doing, I think we'll call it today. I didn't have a lot of pre-planned stuff, but I really appreciate y'all both coming, and I hope this was informative about the deadly nature of most strongly supported questions. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll put everything up in the drive as usual, Mega, and then you can share it around the 5Cs. And Branson, thanks for coming. I'll do these every other week. It's good to just get the stuff going. And then I'll put this up on YouTube and let you know whenever that happens. I'm still like creating title cards and end cards and stuff.
Amazing. Thanks, Mika.
Of course. Of course. All right. Well, I'll see you this week, Branson. Mega, I'll hopefully see you. Am I seeing you this week or the week after? Or just at the next class?
I think just the next class.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, keep me up to date on how things are going if you need any more advice.
Yeah. Definitely
Okay.
will. Definitely will.
All right.
Wait,
Awesome.
Mika, is there
Yeah.
anything I need to do prior to like our session tomorrow? Is there anything I need to review or
Um, Not reviewed. If you can take an LR section today, that'd be great, just to have an extra one to look at.
okay, any particular like test or
Nah, just whatever is available that you don't want to use for a full length PT is what I would say. So probably 120s and 130s. Yeah.
okay, cool, perfect.
Cool. All right. I'll see you tomorrow morning then.
Thanks, bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.